Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are well. Today, I have for you my team selection, and I more than alluded to it yesterday, but I have indeed gone for a very spicy, ultra differential captain this week. I also have solving your problems and 4 particular sections, all of which weren't really touched on yesterday. And as you can see, coupled with that, I have 137k overall rank. In general, that's, I think, very strong, especially considering no triple captain has been played by myself, and I only wildcarded in game week 12, especially when you consider my defense got one singular point last week. I'm pretty happy to just escape with such a small red arrow. I mean, I know I was complaining, not so much complaining, but I was assessing the quality of my defense, and I wasn't particularly bullish on it, but 1 point was low, even for them, but it so happens. And now is a point where I tell you that 40.3% of you haven't subscribed who watch regularly, so if you could do so, I would be very appreciative. As we now look to build to 6,000 subscribers, you're going to be hearing that a little bit more from now on, but without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into the video. Thankfully, it has been confirmed by the manager himself that Robert Sanchez will start on Sunday afternoon, and it was just a midweek rest for himself. Now, I'm actually quite bullish on this fixture. There are a few reasons as to why, and why I think he could come away with a haul. The general dynamics of the two teams, the players, the managers' philosophies, and how they interact with each other, and same with the systems, but also because Spurs aren't in the greatest form. Chelsea always have that potential to give up these low to mid-level XG shots, whereby Sanchez can accumulate saves at a not so risky rate and therefore get closer and closer to that hole. So, from that sense, I'm very much looking forward to owning him this week, and I actually see a higher ceiling than most keepers. On the other side, though, the only quote-unquote negative thing, which is a positive for my team, is that I'm really expecting a very strong performance from Chelsea, and I don't see why we shouldn't score quite a few goals. So that will definitely eat away at his bonus. But, you know, 1 save point and 1 bonus would definitely be more than satisfactory for himself at 4.8 million. So there's not much to say on him. Hopefully Sanchez Supremacy continues, and we shall find out on Sunday afternoon. One thing, actually, before I move on to the rest of the team, people have been asking, should I make goalkeeper transfers, for example? Out Flecken, should I take out Sells? Very much a luxury move. Would not recommend in so many cases. If you really have that luxury and you can afford it, by all means go for it. But personally, in 99% of cases, 95, I wouldn't be doing. Time will tell if they outdo their 1 point that they did last week. But I do have a few concerns, even though the defense does look stronger. Gabriel, in my opinion, didn't play against Arsenal due to concussion. And yeah, sure, you can call it a bit of a conspiracy, but it seems awfully coincidental that he goes off after getting punched in the face. There was no real report of a muscular issue, apart from the one before the West Ham game, but he was clearly fine to play. And just the timing in general, it doesn't seem great. I actually had a section on this maybe 4 or 5 videos ago, but I deleted it whilst I was filming because I thought I wouldn't allude to it. But following what we've seen on Tuesday, Wednesday night, I'm going to allude to it here. So I won't be surprised if he doesn't turn up to Fulham. Big game, really big game. I think they lost it last year. I'm not 100% sure. They've lost it recently though. In the last 2 years, 2-1. I remember that game. So big game. Fulham up to 6th. And if he doesn't play, I'll get Ryan Aït-Nouri off the bench. Not the end of the world. But I also won't have any Arsenal cover, especially with the guys who have like Raya Timber double ups. And thus, I'll definitely be rooting for Fulham there. We'll see if he plays. Hopefully he does. Lewis Hall, he's been unfortunate not to return in terms of the attacking side of the game. I think he's been close to goals and assists a fair few times now. And that's one of the reasons I'm playing him. I'm quite happy just to play him, even if the fixture isn't boasting the highest likelihood of a clean sheet, because I know that the attacking returns, they shouldn't be too far away, and the underlying data and the positions he's taking up and the eye tests all show that. Lewis Dunk, I mean, it's Leicester away, right? Yeah, sure, they put 3 past West Ham, but they were very poor on the night, in my opinion. And I think they would be very fortunate to walk out of their king power with anything against Brighton, even though Brighton have just picked up another loss and dropped points again. So, yeah, but I can't bench Lewis Dunk, right? One thing is, last season he scored 3 goals, but I was watching the game today and I didn't really like the set piece routine for him specifically. He normally takes the back post and either tries to put it across goal, and in general, trying to score from there and that angle. The delivery has to be so good, the timing of the run has to be so good, the jump has to be so good, the connection has to be so good. So I think the likelihood of him scoring from those is slightly reduced compared to someone like Van Heck, who stays more in the middle in those set pieces. But so be it, right? I'm in this situation now. Some of you may be surprised to see Aït-Nouri on the bench. I've got Bowen playing, and I always like to maximize my upside. I also don't think West Ham. I think West Ham are definitely going to score. So, you know, there's no real reason for me to play him, especially what a stellar midfield, if I may say so myself. The prospects of these four this week, and just in general for the weeks going forward, will be particularly high. Starting from left to right with Jared Bowen, as we spoke about, I expect West Ham to score. Whether they win, I'm not too sure. It's almost like a fight to the death between Lopetegui and Gary O'Neill. It feels like them two are treading very thin water, and one loss and they're pretty much out. Bowen easily could have had a haul against Leicester. I'm very, very much excited about owning him as a differential prospect in this run. Look, he hauls here. I think people are making so many moves to go into Trent, to go into a premium defender, which we discuss later, to shift in the attack, to get Isak, that he becomes more and more inaccessible as time goes on. And if he starts to get going, I could see a price rise given he's like not too expensive as well. And then, going forward, an informed differential Jared Bowen for the Christmas period with the fixtures is a tantalizing prospect. What system Gary O'Neill employs, I'm not exactly sure. I personally think it'll be a 5 at the back. I don't mind that. Bowen's not one of those right wingers that stays particularly wide. We've seen that from Mbeumo at times. We've seen that from Salah at times. We've seen that from Saka at times. But Bowen's not so much one of those. He's more than happy and allowed to come into those half spaces and operate there. Also, the way that West Ham build in general is far different. It's not as slow, I guess, and as measured, slightly more direct, which requires the winger to come inside more. So, yeah, only good things to say, really, and more than happy to own. If he puts up 4 blanks in a row, I still won't. I don't think I'll sell him until game week 19, where he's a wonderful route into Eze because there's just so much going for him. And if he puts up 4 blanks in a row, you imagine Lopetegui sacked by then. Salah spoke about yesterday. So many good things and a few bad things, right? Obviously, his form. That's the big thing. Everton, whilst they don't pose the most optimal dynamics for him to thrive, and I mean this with the utmost respect, don't have as much quality on the pitch as the likes of Newcastle, right? So undoubtedly, this in many aspects is an easier game for Salah, coming off an 18-pointer for Newcastle. But then on the flip side, it's away, it's a Merseyside derby, the crowd will be up for it. Everton have found some form. 4-4-2 deep blocks probably never going to be the best conditions for Salah in which to thrive. I think Mykolenko is a good defender, and if he takes the aggressive route that Alex Moreno did, I'm interested to see what he could do, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a good day. But then on the flip side, Salah Salane's found a solve to basically every single dynamic he has been presented with. And the thing with him is it doesn't even need to play well because he just keeps popping up in these moments again and again and again. And he's been so ruthless and efficient from them. As you would have seen in my captaincy video, section yesterday, I alluded to the fact that I'm not going there. The Vice armband isn't even on there. And I'm more than happy with the decision. And we'll come on to the captaincy in greater detail later. Like I said, I think this is a difficult one to call, especially Newcastle or Liverpool having lost points away to Newcastle at St. James's Park. It's a type of thing to maybe transpire a little bit, just a little bit of a spiral. It'll be interesting to see the response from them as well. So I think there's enough to go against it. Cole Palmer, I'm so bullish on this Chelsea performance away at Spurs. There's all the makings of it being a very, very healthy Chelsea win. I don't think anyone can deny that either. I did allude to, again, yesterday, how I think he really needs to play as, and will play as, the provider in this game, and him arriving will be slightly less likely. For example, right, in the Southampton game, there's a beautiful diagonal played by João Felix, I believe it was, into him, where he was essentially the runner and the last man, brought it down, but didn't manage to finish. That against Spurs is probably unlikely, that particular dynamic. Sure, maybe him and Jackson can act between themselves in a similar way they have done throughout the season, where Jackson drops in and Palmer runs off him. I wouldn't be so surprised, but I do think it's a lot more of Palmer feeding Jackson, just given the nature of the quick transitions that will take place and the distances of them. Moving on to Saka, I mean, I'm not in love with this fixture, right? Like you see again, Fulham today, aggressive, physical, deep block as well. The only thing is, like, we can talk about this another day when we talk about Brighton. I do think that whilst they got a lot right today and the scoreline wasn't reflective of the performance, having Matt O'Reilly in that right-hand side 10 really took a lot away from them and a lot of threat away from them. Not so much anything against him. I think that was more of a Hartzler thing, in my humble opinion. But Fulham have shown the tendency to be very difficult to beat, and I've spoken about this on this channel. So yeah, I think Saka's just an easy hold, and I'm not getting anywhere close to captaining him. You will see Morgan Rogers on the bench, and you may be surprised, especially considering I was an advocate for starting him last week. And this is arguably the best fixture he's going to have this season, probably, especially with Southampton's absentees. But we'll speak about it later. Expected minutes, and that's the reason he's on the bench. Understanding of risk and reward, and we'll speak about that later. But now let's move on to the forward. João Pedro was fantastic tonight, I thought, in terms of the level of performance and the display of quality that he possesses, and he's done that on a number of occasions. Now, for Brighton, Leicester, like I said, I thought they were very poor against West Ham, and the scoreline was completely unreflective of the game. I'm not sure they'll be so lucky against Brighton. Maybe they will be, and good on them if they are. But if not, I think João Pedro can punish them, especially at 9. Looked a real threat today. And had they had better right-hand side dynamics, I think the fluidity between Aderinga and Matt O'Reilly was fine. I liked when Aderinga came inside. I also liked his threat in the wide areas. But in what I'll call slower build-up, when Fulham were well set and there was a settled structure, having Matt O'Reilly between the lines, I didn't think was optimal, simply because he's someone who I think is better at arriving and leveraging his physicality as opposed to playing between the lines when he has his back to goal, for a variety of reasons, mainly due to the physical makeup and the type of small space quality he has. So I don't expect Hertzler to do that again, because I thought that was the significant weakest in the Brighton team. And for that reason, whether João Pedro plays at 9 or 10, I think it'll be dangerous. Welbeck's coming off a knock. I doubt he'll come straight back into the side. So his real competition is Evan Ferguson, but he's been very carefully managed. It's also going to be a somewhat physical game away, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Evan Ferguson on the bench again, and then João Pedro at 9. But if not, he'll play at 10 and get a decent amount of minutes, especially considering he got hooked to 80 as well. So yeah, no way am I benching him when Rodgers is an expected minutes concern. And like I said, we will speak about that later. Watkins, I mean, that's what I bought him for, right? Well, I actually really like the Brentford fixture as well, but this was the week where I thought there was a lot of upside attached to it as well. Potentially leaving the team next week. We'll see how he does, and we'll see how things play out. I know some of you thought about captaining him, and he's not in solving your problem, so I don't mind touching on it here. If someone told me he was getting 90, I would be more open to it. But I just think that this is a potential like 75, 78 minutes one. And I think against Southampton, I'd rather have an extra 12, 15 minutes to play with. And obviously, it could be a bit less, could be a bit more. I just feel like I trust other players a little bit more as well. I knew that Brentford was a good game stylistically for Aston Villa. I want to see what happens if stylistically Southampton take a slightly different approach. If 5-4-1 has more compactness, then how does Watkins fare? I don't really need to take on that risk in my particular situation. Owning him is enough, albeit I do expect him to do well / very well. Otherwise, I never would have bought him. Just a slight caveat to the captaincy. Then we move on to Nicholas Jackson, and it's probably appropriate that I switch to the screen with the armband and the vice captaincy, because he has indeed been given the armband. Now, with regards to the philosophy and the risk reward management and everything associated with that, there's a section on that later this video in solving your problems, in not an attempt to get you off Salah, but just an attempt to get you to make the best decision. Whether Jackson or Salah is the best decision is completely irrelevant. It's just about you doing what is quote unquote right. Actually, no, in this situation, it would be right, as you will see later on. I've already laid out all the tactical reasons as to why I think this is the best captaincy, and that isn't the Everything You Need to Know video, which I strongly recommend you go and watch, and there's a variety of other things in there that won't be covered in this video. The stylistic matchup, all the tactical reasons, that's all there. The rest is there for him, so I don't see why he shouldn't play 90 minutes. He's better at pressing off the ball than Nkunku as well. That's really useful, especially later in the game, whether we're cruising or not. It's just more useful. And Nkunku's just got 90, right? So he probably won't. In terms of morale, there's no need to bring him on as well. I never spoke about how he could potentially get points from the press. I spoke about that with regards to Cole Palmer, Nicholas Jackson against Aston Villa, but this is another way with the way that Spurs build, he could press. I spoke about transition, etc., right? The main thing here is just the fact that I think it's the best option, so I'm going to go for it and not allow any fear to essentially offset that. Why am I not captaining Cole Palmer? For the reasons I alluded to earlier, specifically relating to Jackson's upside in this particular matchup and the fact that I think Cole Palmer could turn provider, not just for Nicholas Jackson, but also feeding the runs of Neto and Madueke. I think the Newcastle game and that type of pass, something like that, where those transitional opportunities, those long-distance transitional opportunities require a passing range of that quality, and potentially leveraging Enzo Fernandez's as well when he finds himself a bit deeper. But yeah, that's enough about the captaincy now. Let's move on to solving your problems, and we'll have a little bit more about it there. Solving your problems. There are 5 sections listed there. However, I have combined 2 of them into one, so there are 4 different ones that we need to go through, starting with who should you be benching. Now, many of you will be in many different situations, right? Okay, fine, you'll have Cunha and Mbeumo Rogers and Semenyo, but you won't have Wood. Some of you will have Cunha and Mbeumo Rogers and Wood, but you won't have Semenyo, etc., right? So I'm going to give a more generalist perspective, and then you can extrapolate for your own team. I've benched Morgan Rogers. So in your particular case, I'm probably quite bullish on benching Morgan Rogers. I would love to have a 90-minute Morgan Rogers guaranteed pretty much for this type of game, but I don't think we have that. We've got RB Leipzig away midweek, and that's a big game, considering where they are in the table for the Champions League. There's a lot of upside to be gained with a win, and there's a lot of downside to be absorbed should they not. And thus, I think with the minutes he's been playing, with Emery's comment, that's the big thing for me. With Emery publicly saying that, okay, Emery Buendia can play, and the fact that he played 86 minutes last game, I think we just put him on the bench. Even if he does start 65, that's good against Southampton. Don't get me wrong, that's good, but slightly unnecessary risk to take when our squads are so deep and there's so many good options, right? For example, people are talking about, should I bench Matthias Cunha away to a West Ham side that have had a very poor season? Should I bench Semenyo, who plays for a Bournemouth side that are flying 7th in the league, is it? 7th, 8th in the league. And they're away to Ipswich, one of the better fixtures you could have. So for me, I don't think you can bench Semenyo. If you're going to buy him and not playing him in this week, then I don't really see the point in having him, right? Because who are you playing over him? Not many people have a better fixture, and you can't have that many premiums, right? You quite literally cannot have enough premiums to cover every single spot, whereby Semenyo isn't worth it. So for me, you have to play him. The other 3 I would say are situational. Wood is probably easier to bench, and by far I would say the easiest to bench out of these 5. But you'll have different situations where maybe you need to. It's between him and a defender. Going away to Man United won't be easy. They've got a lot of on-the-ball issues, I think, at the moment. Their press has got issues. But one thing they don't have so much is the defensive structure and the way they limit chances, right? All that Arsenal and how Arsenal struggled to break them down, and they are one of the better teams in which to do so. So for me, Wood would go on the bench. Between Cunha and Mbeumo, yeah, then it becomes a lot tougher. For me, I'm benching Brian Mbeumo. I think I'm just trusting the fact that Cunha's got better fundamentals than Mbeumo at the moment with his positioning and his underlying statistics, more so what that represents as opposed to the numbers. And he plays a worse team as well. So yeah, I'd probably bench Brian Mbeumo in a lot of the spots that you guys are in, and if not, maybe Chris Wood. Is a seismic shift around the corner for our structures within FPL? Well, potentially. Yesterday, I touched on big at the back, and whether or not it's back in the form of Urian Timber, Gabriel, who I didn't need to speak about because a lot of you own, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, and Josko Gvardy goal. Now, you probably are looking to get in at least one of those, Gabriel aside, right? You might even be looking to get in 2 of those. Not so long ago, we were almost all pretty much set on 1 premium defender as the optimal structure, or a lot of us were at least, and then going from there. But now that we've assessed the options, attributed the relevant utility value to them, how many do we need, and should we be going for 2 or 3, and do we even need 2, right? I would say it's very much situational, because I'm going to take the rough template structure, right? A deep squad in terms of the fact that you have 8 attackers and probably like 4 playing defenders, okay? I'm going to assume that you don't own Haaland because so many people don't. I'm going to assume Salah, Saka, Palmer, and then from there, I will make the relevant adjustments, okay? Let's just say, roughly, people own a cheap forward in the form of João Pedro, Van Nisten, with blah, blah, blah. Then they own 1 expensive-ish forward in Isak, Watkins, Jackson, right? Okay. That's 3rd forward spot. Some people have Cunha, in which there's some cash relinquished. Some people have another cheap forward, but some people now will be looking to move into Isak and Watkins. For example, Watkins in 15, or even Isak from 15, 16, 17, /18, and then Watkins 19, 20 is wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. So some people may attribute a lot of value to that, which obviously takes up cash and therefore means it can't be spent in defense. However, if you don't want Isak in 16 and 17 when he has his great fixtures, when Cunha has the same fixtures, just the reverse way around, if you think he can cover him alongside having Jackson and João Pedro, well, then you can take that money and put it into the defense. And now you can have a 2 premium structure very easily. Let's assume, again, a template structure where everyone has Saka, Salah, and Palmer. And to accompany them in midfield, they have 1 of Rodgers and Semenyo, and then 1 mid-price mid. form of Bowen or Mbeumo or Gordon or Madison, right? Options such as those mentioned. Now, what if instead of having one of those mid-price mids, we downgraded to a Semenyo, to an Enzo Fernandez as an example, to maybe even a Dejan Kulusevski or a Noni Madueke, and then use that defense to upgrade one of the cheap defenders into a premium. Again, that's another route to them. And some people will say that no, I'd rather have Bowen and a cheap defender because I think these defenders can do really well, and I don't think these cheap midfielders match Bowen. Some people have the completely opposite view. Hence why I frame this in a light where it's situational, but also I've given you the formula essentially to figure out where and what is your optimal structure. Some of you will be happy to have a second cheap forward, place of Isak, a second cheap midfielder in the place of Bowen, and then look to upgrade both defenders and have a stacked defense of, like, let's say Gabriel, Gvardiol, and Virgil van Dijk. And that defense probably does really, really well. But do you lose so many points up the pitch that it's essentially not worth it? Maybe, maybe not. So in terms of the optimal defensive structure, that is the formula I think you need to use to figure it out. For me, it's probably 2 premiums. That's what I would like at the moment. But maybe down the line, maybe in the short term, I think you can still get away with just going Gabriel on the assumption. Now, this was a section I combined into one. People are considering selling Matthias Cunha following 2 consecutive blanks, 2 very poor performances from Wolves. And it's interesting, right? Because you give anyone in the league, West Ham away, Ipswich and Leicester, with the fundamentals that Cunha has and the performances that he's put up this season and the amount of points he's racked up, especially in the recent past, people will call you crazy. But so is the way of FPL in how things change so quickly, and perspectives can change so quickly. You really have to assess it for yourself. What do you think he does in these next 3 games? I personally don't think he'll do that great. I think Ipswich and Leicester will both smell blood. And the other thing is, when he did return, he was overperforming XG. Now, I really don't like to use that because I think there are a lot of layers to XG. Actually, in this example, it's not too bad. There are a lot of layers to XG. So whenever I do use that in the future, I will use it with significant context and I will discuss the variable at length, right? Because I think it needs to be justified in a slightly different way to the loose usage of it, right? But the haul against Fulham brings a ball down beautifully from a brilliant diagonal switch and slots it home, scores a screamer from outside their box. Wonderful assist. The assist is fine, right? It was really, really well taken finish, but the assist is fine. Then a screamer against Southampton as well. So all of those scenarios where by his 3 goals have come from very, very minimal XG. Can he keep that up? Probably not. And like I told you, I fundamentally think Wolves have had a chance creation issue. It's one of the reasons I've been so down on them as a team and their assets recently. And as a result, I personally don't think it's a bad sell to go for one of the likes of Alexander Isak or action should not be able to hold on to Cunha given the run of form as of late. Finally, do you need Isak? No, you absolutely do not need him for reasons discussed earlier in terms of what he facilitates elsewhere. But Brentford away, Leicester at home, Ipswich away. There is a lot of upside attached to that. Even like Brentford in a transitional type of game that you can. And look, when I say a transitional type of game, I clearly mean high volume of transition. Those type of games, they're clearly present, and Isak thrives on, right, and so do Newcastle as well. It's one of their best weapons. That's what the opposition can do for them. So yeah, I think there's a lot of upside at 3 weeks, and I'll be more than happy to make the move in a lot of cases. I just think you need to understand the risk when you're taking a player with those fundamentals out for these 3 fixtures. Have conviction as a result. Jackson, you know how much I love Jackson. They're 1.5 for a reason. Bad says pretty much everything you need to know. To conclude, I have some final captaincy thoughts which I would like to share with you, not so much relating to football or who to choose, but more so relating to strategy and philosophy within FPL. But before we touch on that, some people in the comments were talking about Bowen and Isak captaincy, both of whom I considered putting in the section. But for me, I think one with Bowen, given you don't know how things are going to play out with that West Ham Wolves, probably a little bit too much risk associated with that move, an unnecessary risk to take on in this spot, especially when there are high upside options elsewhere. And Isak, to be honest, I like from a tactical perspective, it certainly makes sense, and I don't really have anything to say about it. The main reason for the creation of this section was not just to talk about Bowen or Isak. It was more so to talk about the strategy behind captaincy and the philosophy behind it as well. I ask you, how are you trying to play the game? What are you trying to achieve? Because in these particular spots, when you look at the landscape of the game, right, next 3 to 4 weeks, there's no reason why Salah should not be mass captained when fixtures and the form, especially if he keeps going. And it's going to be very, very, very difficult to justify a play against that, right? I would say this is the fixture to potentially go against. Now, if you're trying to play the game in a way similar to myself, where you really look to maximize upside whilst taking on X amount of risk, a sensible amount of risk, a wonderful spot in which to do so. I also think if you're trying to achieve ranks at highest echelons, this is again a very nice spot in which to exploit that potential upside. So for me, it's really a question of not just what do you think in terms of the football analysis, but also how you're playing strategically. Very good spot to take on. Again, what actually not again. One thing I didn't mention about Spurs that I was enlightened about through Chris Tan's analysis is that Spurs have been very poor going from Thursday night fixtures in the Europa League to then playing on Sunday, just in terms of their record. Ben Davies is now injured. Some of you would have seen the videos with the fans and Ange in terms of their interaction after the game. There's just a real negative feel around Spurs at the moment, and it's happened many a time in the past where a manager is getting to the end of his reign, and the Spurs fans, a lot of them want him gone. So that, of course, doesn't speak for all of them, but a lot of them aren't happy. So I just think if an early goal goes in, especially given the tension versus Chelsea, how important it is for them to beat us. I don't think they're going to do it, but you know what I mean. And maybe even 2 early goals, it could get pretty ugly, and it could turn very sour inside of there. So for me, good opportunity to exploit. And lastly, if you are on the fence, right, about captaining not just Nicholas Jackson, I'm not telling you to captain Nicholas, captain Fabianski for all I care. If you think that is the best decision, all I am saying here is make sure your decisions are rational. Do not be so fearful that you're going to captain Salah, right? If you don't think Salah's the best option, even if you think it's 50.1, 49.9 in favor of Cole Palmer, go and captain Cole Palmer. Take the fear out of it. And I think you will find a newfound joy in being able to make the best decision again and again and again. And the more you do this, the less you'll become attached to outcomes. And I think you'll find a lot more pleasure in the game, but also far less pain. I also think it's just doing what is right. And that's probably the most important thing, making the best decision and not worrying about things which are completely out of control and just doing your best. Because I don't think when people bring fear into it, that's really what they are doing. So that's just my 2 pence on it. And I thought it important to share. I was on the fence a little bit about making this session, but I thought some of you at least would take it a while, and it's important for you to. Yeah, and that is all she wrote for this game week content, ladies and gentlemen. I will, of course, see you on Sunday for transfer plans, which I very much look forward to, straight after that Spurs Chelsea game, which will have huge implications on my game week. If you did enjoy the video, please do like it. For those of you who have not subscribed yet, whether you're new around here, whether you regularly and haven't done so, consider pressing that button as we now push for 6,000 subscribers, and who knows where we could finish by the end of. Thank you so much for your support as always. I always do really, really, really appreciate it. Very grateful for it. I shall see you on the other side. Good luck, and I'll also see you on the comments.